Hello, welcome to my talk on the rationale of teaching less widely taught languages in an AMI environment. A seemingly esoteric topic for an AMI conference, which deals with enhancing the quality of AMI teaching in academic institutions. Nevertheless, I thought being interested in the multilingual university and multilingual academia, I thought this might also be of interest to you. I think it's probably fair to say that because we've lived in a monolingual society, a monolingual environment, at least those of us who are born and raised in Germany, that for most of us, it seemed that, or most of the people living in those kind of monolingual societies, it seems that the paradise is monolingual. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have no problems communicating with whoever we meet, if it weren't for those different languages that are spoken and that we don't speak and others don't speak? And this is, of course, this is not a new idea, the paradise, the monolingual paradise. It goes back to the Bible, as you all know, the myth of Babel, where multilingualism is seen as a punishment for the sins of man. And sometimes I have the feeling that even in a modern society, even in sort of very openly minded people, that they still see the monolingual university, the monolingual environment in the university as the ideal situation. And they may look back at that, or sometimes look back with envy at the past when academia, or the academic world had a common lingua franca, and which was actually Latin. And it seems that more and more the English has replaced Latin as a lingua franca. But that said about the monolingual paradise, the situation in the university has changed over the years, and I would call that the Babel complex. The university, when you go through the corridors or run through the corridors of the university, when you go to the cafeteria, it seems that Babel has finally arrived at the university, because the majority of the members of the university is plurilingual. And there's hardly any, I mean, at least in the German context or in the Polish context or in other contexts, it may be true for sort of universities in England or United States, where you might find the odd person who's not plurilingual, who doesn't know anything about English. But for most of our cases, for most of our students, that's definitely true. They are plurilingual. Maybe they've grown up bilingually or trilingually. Maybe they've learned several languages over the years. Now, the problem is that the stakeholders and faculty of our universities do not generally see this new multilingualism as an advantage for teaching and research. It is part of university folklore. We have our international nights with cooking and Latin American students appearing in national costumes. And of course, we all cherish this, that people like that. It creates a kind of international atmosphere. But as soon as it comes to teaching and research, it is either the national language or it is English. And they sometimes advocate English only. They don't see a point in using other languages, but English and the national language for teaching and research. And I can sympathize, or very much sympathize with this idea. And I see this as a big advantage. But nevertheless, because it's useful, and I will not argue against English, but I will argue that English is not enough. And this is what I call the AMI dilemma. I think EMI is inevitable for the internationalization of higher education, but it can be a major obstacle for the investment in and the promotion of academic multilingualism. And I think academic multilingualism doesn't mean that I'm advocating the teaching and research in a large variety of language. I think that's unfeasible. I'm arguing, and it's the view of English only, and that the teaching of other languages, but English is far too heavy burden on the university budget. I would argue that it is inevitable. It's not the icing of the cake of academic education, but it is an essential ingredient in university education. Now, there are what I call 21st century questions when it comes to languages or the integration of languages or language policies in academic institutions. The first question is, with English as the academic lingua franca, what role do other languages play in academia and beyond? Is the teaching of languages in schools the end of language teaching for most of our students, or would we like to send them outside university? If you want to learn Spanish, Chinese, whatever, you can go to outside institutions. You can go to private language schools, or I don't know, British Council, or the no, not the British Council, because that's England. But let's say to go to Instituto de Cervantes for Spanish, or go to the Confucius Institute. The second question is, what obligations, and I think they have an obligation, do institutions of higher education have to promote multilingualism by offering language teaching in languages other than English to their students? English should be offered. There should be a kind of a mentoring and tutoring for students who could actually do not reach the level, or have not reached the level by entering the university. There should be definitely be teaching for that, and the level of English should be high for students and staff, and we should do everything to ensure that we have a high level of language proficiency in English. Now, the question then that I think is in the focus of this talk, and was for a long time in the focus of my my engagement for languages in higher education, integration of languages in higher education. Now, French, German as a second language, and Spanish, they may be obvious, but what's the point? Why should academic institutions teach the languages that are not taught in the school system? Why should they introduce or give students the opportunity to teach, to go to classes where they can learn languages which they have not learned in the school system? Now, first of all, why a few, just to make things very clear, what I mean by less widely taught languages. Less widely taught languages are not what we sometimes, what sort of in folk linguistics call exotic languages. No, that's not what I mean. Less widely taught languages are, the concept of less widely taught languages is very context specific. Less widely taught languages are the languages that are very rarely taught in the school system. Doesn't mean that less widely taught languages are less widely spoken languages, not at all. Now, because Chinese, Turkish, Polish, Arabic, they are widely spoken languages, widely used languages, but they're not taught in the school system. Therefore, in my view, they are the less widely taught languages we're talking about. Now, here's one important point, or as part of the rationale of teaching those languages in higher education. I think to give students, I think the basic point is an employability factor. Now, English is something which does not give you a big advantage in the labor market because it's taken for granted. It's not seen as a special skill. It's seen as something that you have to bring to your job. And if you don't have it, you won't get a job. But now, when you look at the students, what they really need is ways of separating themselves from others. It's what counts now, what actually counts now in the labor market is individuality and singularity. So how am I different? What is my advantage in the labor market? If universities consider themselves more than just distributors of knowledge, but see themselves as educators in a broad sense, then they must take account of the developments in society and business. How am I different? What makes me different? And students want to be different. If you look at the notebooks of students, how they individualize a mass-produced machine, they can see that one of the driving forces is the personality factor for them in education is the personality factor. And knowing one of those languages that are not taught in school, that people cannot automatically expect from a graduate, is what they actually want and need. Just a few, to give you a sort of empirical evidence for what I've been saying. We did in my university at Viadrina, we did an alumni study in 2011, and asking the students what was important for you for finding a job, and what was also important for you in the job, what gave you an advantage in the job. And it turns out when you look at the factors marked in red, that on top came foreign language skills and study abroad, which means they are well aware, these are alumni, they're already in the labor market, and they know very well that the labor market needs multilingual students, and they have a bonus when they are multilingual. And what we did in the university, we actually integrated languages into the curriculum of the different subjects, and students had to do languages, but of course they did much more than what they had to do and what was actually required. There's also the policy argument. I think what is important is of course, a lot of people would say, and what sometimes the criticism raised against academia is that it presents a bubble. It's the ivory tower. It is a bubble. But we have to, within university, we have, within sort of academia, we have to learn how to communicate with society at large. And we have to preserve and develop all languages as academic languages to make communication possible between academia and society. And this is what is so important. We need experts who can actually speak and talk to the Arab world. We need experts that can discuss issues with Chinese partners, and they have to do this. They cannot. There's a certain limit to doing this in English, because as soon as you do it in English, your partner is well aware that you're not too familiar with the cultural factors in communication. Then you don't know very much about the country if you don't speak the language of that particular country. And this is important. This is especially important in times of crisis. And we've seen this. If let's say in the pandemic that we're still in, if our experts, if our virus experts would not be able to communicate, or could only communicate in English, then this would cause much more confusion in society, and would be very, very problematic for making the right policy decisions and taking the right measures in politics. So we have to facilitate international communication outside the national discourse bubbles. We need people who can actually speak to the outside world. And for that, the only chance to educate students so they can be able to do that is to do this by teaching them languages. And of course, why does this have to take place at the university? Because private institutions cannot afford, it's too expensive to afford teaching less widely taught languages. And publishers are very rarely interested in the development of materials. It's in the public interest to teach those languages. Therefore, the public should pay for it. Universities are the only institutions where languages, less widely taught languages, can be taught professionally. We have to make sure that this happens, and it happens with high quality. There's another factor which I think is, to my mind, very important, and it has to do with learning languages as a cognitive challenge. I think, and this goes for all students of all subjects, I think they need to be aware of languages and the role of languages in communication, and the role of languages in their subject, and the role of languages in their society. And learning a less widely taught language helps reflecting on one's own language and on languages in general. It turns students into experts for specific cultures, and by giving them access to these cultures, and also, side effect, it boosts their self-confidence. I said at the very beginning, I think there are academics who think for research, English is definitely enough. But I think there's a research element which sometimes being overlooked, is we need to foster cooperation between language departments and the language center. Joint development of course materials and curriculum. Language departments can use the language center as a laboratory. So, and that is research per se. And at the same time, most of the universities have departments dealing with politics, with cultures, even with culture and medicine, or culture and engineering, in which those less widely taught languages are spoken by people in the laboratory. And I think languages are an element within those laboratories. We in the language profession have to make sure that there's a focus on languages in those laboratories in the wider sense, and there is a developing language sensitivity in academia in general. And that's basically our job. Now, what does this mean? What needs to be done? I think, first of all, we need to develop appropriate didactics and materials for a lot of those languages for academic purposes. Academic purposes doesn't necessarily mean C2 for all languages, but we have to look at the need of academia and see how languages can meet those needs. We have to create exchange opportunities. Do not send students to countries where they do not have at least a beginner's knowledge of the languages that's being spoken. So English or Erasmus English is not enough. We should not encourage students to go to countries where they have no clue about the language that's spoken there. We have to integrate, on a very practical level, we have to integrate less widely taught languages in all courses of study and reward students with ECTS credits for their efforts on all levels. And we have to, and I think, fortunately, this is a topic that's been widely discussed and where models of implementation have already been suggested. And I think there's a lot happening at the moment, fortunately, on this particular level, because we have to help students develop the heritage languages into academic languages. And this is a very important point, definitely for my university, that universities have the opportunity, universities in border areas, and there's lots of universities in border areas, they have to reach out across the border. And also, when they reach out across the border for academic cooperation, language is part of the package. And what we've learned during the pandemic is how effective, specifically for languages, in order to create authentic communication situations where students can actually use languages. We have part of the digitalization process of the university should also be to give students the opportunity for digital learning of languages. Doesn't necessarily mean that all universities have to offer all languages. Far from it, but they can provide access for digital learning and show how it can be done. And this is part of the remit of our profession, the language profession. Now, to come to an end, I think what I think a very important point for me is that languages, language centers cannot offer all languages, and they should not, but they should make at least one of those languages, one of their specialities. And use needs analysis, base all their endeavors as far as teaching of those languages is concerned on research. And they should promote, they should be the places for promotion of multilingualism by providing an ideal and positive learning environment. And of course, finally, language centers have to show examples of good practice to show other universities, but only if they have good practice, if they can show within the university and outside the university, then of course we can show what can be done, that teaching less widely taught languages has a very positive effect on academia in Germany and internationally. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. And I'm very much looking forward to your questions, criticism, suggestions, and ideas. Thank you very much.